Jacob and Mary Kaufman arrived in the town of Berlin in 1877, recently married and with plans to establish the Kaufman planing mill. Berlin was a growing town, and Kaufman was going to provide the lumber. A couple of years ago, I talked with Edmund Kaufman, who at the age of 92 had watched the city of Kitchener grow. This was what, about 1920? How old would you have been? 10 years old?
Maybe around 1920, I'd be about 4 or 5 years old. And then Dominion Tire out there, that was way out of town.
Yeah.
And they built Strange Street, Park Street, and Boone Street behind for all the workers for the Dominion Tire.
Right.
But that was the biggest tire company in Canada.
Yeah. Edmund was eager to remember his grandparents, Jacob and Mary.
He was a good mechanic, and he was running a sawmill for a guy by the name of Rotz at Gad's Hill. And this guy must have had a bunch of bush or something, because his daughter, Mary, would mark the trees, and then Jacob, he'd go and cut them, and he'd cut them up in the mill. He married the boss's daughter.
Yeah.
And then they ran that mill for a while, and then why they came to Kitchener, I don't know, but he comes to Kitchener and sets up a lumber company.
Yeah.
Rotz and Kaufman.
That's right.
Right on the railroad track.
Right.
And he said, people said to Kaufman, "You're crazy. Why are you doing this out in the country? Why don't you stay in town?" He said, I want to be near the railroad track. Our company started in 1877.
Jacob was a carpenter and was soon operating a factory. His first products were doors and windows. He then produced large volumes of wooden fanning mills that farmers were using to automate threshing. In 1899, Jacob Kaufman became involved in the rubber business. Along with Berliners George Schlee and A.L. Breithup, they established the Berlin Rubber Company. 4 years later, that success led Jacob and T.H. Ryder to establish another rubber company called Merchant Rubber. Today, this building is being repurposed as a Breithup block. Consolidated Rubber, a large conglomerate out of the United States, came to Berlin and purchased both of Jacob Kaufman's rubber companies, Berlin Rubber and Merchant Rubber. Edmund remembers that the contract stated,
"You can't start up for 5 years. You can't start up again." But somehow or other, they missed my grandfather's name on the bunch. So they got together and then they started the Kaufman Rubber, see? That's how the Kaufman Rubber got started.
Jacob Kaufman and his son A.R. were able to start yet another rubber manufacturing company, this time called Kaufman Rubber, that they built on King Street in 1908. In Berlin, the Kaufmans became known for their financial acumen combined with community service. The Kaufmans became members of the Zion Evangelical Church, which had purchased one of the first lots on Schneider Road, now called Queen Street South. The Zion Evangelical congregation had built a wood-frame chapel at the foot of Church Street on Schneider Road and dedicated the building on September 25, 1841. The congregation grew, and by 1865, the frame church was replaced with a spacious brick building. By 1893, Jacob and Mary Kaufman were eager congregants, helping to plan and finance a major building expansion. Jacob Kaufman, along with John Anthes, purchased property on Weber Street for the church. Then on April 19, 1894, Jacob Kaufman purchased the old Evangelical Church on Queen Street for $3,000. Jacob quickly converted the church to apartments, and the family looked after the apartments for the next 66 years. In April 1905, the Berlin YWCA was started by a board of Berlin women, and Mary Kaufman was the first president. She was described as a woman of singular drive and devotion to her community. Mary determined that the first home for the YWCA in Berlin would be in the old Zion church that Jacob had converted to apartments. The Berlin YWCA was quickly up and running, organizing classes for women in German conversation, Bible study, cooking, sewing, and physical culture. There were up to 18 young women boarders who paid $3.75 per week. Berlin factories, especially the nearby WGR shirt factory at Queen and Cortlandt, benefited by the provision of stable housing for young women who came to town alone to work in the factories. In 1914, a successful subscription drive raised $34,000, of which Kaufmans contributed $10,000, enabling the YWCA to construct its own building on Frederick Street, where the YWCA still has its offices today. Edmund Kaufman was a World War II veteran, a former owner of Kaufman Lumber, and, until his death, owned and operated Schlechters Limited in the building his grandfather built in 1918.
Those posts are the same in the rubber factory.
That's right.
Same posts, because forms from that I moved them about 10 times up at our AMO lumber company.
And these are the same forms from over there?
Yeah, yeah.
No
My
kidding.
dad said, oh, we'll never use them. So we finally put them in the boiler, we made steam on them.
Edmund had fond memories of his grandparents and all they accomplished. Edmund was 4 when Jacob died.
The last I remember him, took and showed me the horses. He had about 68 horses one time in the lumber yard.
Yeah.
And they were downstairs where the
Where
building
the-
is now. And
Yeah.
he took me to show me the horses. This horse's name was, this was Rocket, this was Bob, this was something else. And then he took me by the hand, and there was a ramp going from the basement up so the horses could go. It was a concrete ramp.
Great.
And he took me up there, and he took me in the back door of the house out there. And the last I remember him, he says, Esmond, get my slippers. And I don't remember any more about him after that.
Jacob and Mary Kaufman took a lively interest in everything affecting the welfare of their community. When Jacob died, the Kaufman Rubber Company produced most of the rubber footwear manufactured in Canada. His pioneering factories in the rubber industry created 3,000 jobs. Jacob and Mary Kaufman were self-taught, augmenting their minimal schooling with reading, travel, observation, and action. Both were known to be plain-spoken, sociable, and engaging to all classes. They were always ready to help a good cause. 137 years later, their legacy is strong.